All right, we are starting. So we have been doing this book already for a while, meaning we first had 2 classes of introduction where we discussed some of the overarching themes, some of the background information to understand the story. Then we had 5 classes on chapter 1, and now we are up to our 3rd class on chapter 2. And we're probably not going to finish chapter 2 today. So it's in competition with chapter 1. 5 on chapter 1, and now we're on our 3rd class on chapter 2. The goal today is to learn from verse 13 through 19, possibly 20. We will see. I never put pressure on myself when I teach to, as they say, cover ground. The idea is to absorb the themes and apply them. That's always my version of the story of the goal. And we're going to see what happened in the continuation. We're in the middle of this first pivotal encounter between Boaz and Ruth. So we're going to see the continuation of what happened. And then when she comes home and reports to her mother-in-law the events of the day. So we're in chapter 2, and we are up to verse 13. So if you remember so far, what has happened in this encounter between Boaz and Ruth, that is very, very significant to our storyline, which is why Samuel, the prophet, Shmuel, who wrote the book of Ruth, gives it a lot of ink. Because again, this is leading in the direction, the point of this whole work. So we said first, Ruth happened, so to speak, to wind up in one of Boaz's fields. It was definitely not intentional. She didn't know who she was going to. Just happened. Obviously a theme here, how God makes things happen, and we say just happened to be there. And then again, just coincidentally, Boaz, who doesn't normally hang out in his fields, he's the leader of the Jewish people, just got up from sitting Shiva for mourning for his wife, happens to come to his fields, and not just to his fields, but to that same field, because Boaz happened to have several fields. He was a very, very wealthy man, and he goes to that field specifically. And then we said he noticed Ruth. Look at that girl, that woman of 40, who we're viewing here as a girl, testimony to her beauty and energy. And she's like, she's so modest. She looks different from all the other women in her modesty. She's so knowledgeable of the laws. Who is she? And then he turned to the foreman, remember? Who is she? And we said the foreman's answer might have been negative, might have been positive. Seemingly was negative. That's that. Moabite, the one that came back with Naomi. Don't get too interested, Boaz. Find yourself a nice Jewish girl. And the Boaz is realizing there's something very special about her. So he starts talking to her, right? And this is what he said to her. He said, I'm very happy you're here. Don't go somewhere else. Stay in this field. Which we said is like, if he wants to be nice, we could think it'd been a lot nicer, considering he's so wealthy and she's a relative. She is the widow of his cousin. But this was his niceness, his kindness, as we discussed last week. Keep your eyes on the field. Remember, we said he understood she was a righteous person. He wanted her eyes to bless his field, to create that bounty for his fields. And stick with where you are. Don't worry. I told the men not to bother you. If you're thirsty, you could drink from their water. You don't have to go, as the people do, you have to go very far or drink from the very inferior water. You could drink straight from the jug. So this was his kindness, which is nice, but we said not really so nice considering how nice he could have been. And then we heard her reply, and she's like, wow, this is so amazing of you, which we said maybe the whole thing was a test to see what's her caliber. How would she respond when he really could have been a lot nicer and is a relative and is saying basically, I'm going to let you do what God allows and you can feel free to do what you're allowed to do. But she didn't look at it like that at all. She's like, wow, here I'm a nothing. I'm a nobody. You could see how she was being treated, maybe not meanly, but just natively by the people around. Like, I'm the nobody, I'm the foreigner, I'm the Moabite convert, and you're being so nice to me. Like, why are you being so nice to someone like me, someone as unworthy as me? So you really see her humility here. She no sense of me, the princess, no sense of me, I'm so special, I'm a convert. She was like, I'm a nothing. What are you being so nice to me for? And then we had Boaz's response, which is as far as we got, where Boaz says, no, I heard the specialness of what you've done. What was the specialness that Boaz heard? How nice she was to her mother-in-law, how she had accompanied her, she hadn't abandoned her, how she had persevered with God. Remember, we compared her to Abraham, that both of them sort of abandoned their parents, their birthplace, and went to God. And we spoke how Rus had sort of a superiority because God didn't call her. She went on her own. So here I know you left it all. You left the whatever palace existed in those days. You came to be close to God. That's so amazing. You gave up everything the world considers important. Potential husband, like who's going to marry a Moabite convert. Financial security. She's now a beggar. And you did all that just to be close to God. And then he blesses her and says, God is going to reward you. You should know. God is going to reward you. And the ultimate reward is you're under his wings. You're so close to him now because you came to seek refuge with him. So that was his words to her. And that was as far as we learned. So now we're up to verse 13 in chapter 2, which is Rus's response to Boaz's kind words. And Boaz basically saying, implying the reward she was going to receive. Like, here, you're thanking me. What am I giving you? Some ability to harvest, some water. God's going to repay you back big time. And we spoke about this theme last week about how God always does repay. And so that's what Boaz was telling her. God's going to pay you back. Me, I'm giving you some allowing you to harvest in my field, what God allows. I'm giving you some water. And I'm telling you, I told the men not to start off with you. God's going to pay you back because God always pays back. So this was her response to that. So then she said, this is a response, may I continue to find favor in your eyes, my master, because you have comforted me, and because you have spoken to the heart of your maidservant, though I am not even as worthy as one of your maidservants. That was her response. So meaning like you're being so nice to me. You've given me this comfort because you're sort of saying I'm worthy. I'm worthy being part of God's people, because maybe other people were being sort of racist. They were treating her disrespectfully because they were viewing her as, this is that, so to speak, shiksa, that Machlon married. Okay, she converted officially, supposedly, perhaps, maybe, even for real. Who cares? Like they were looking at her with a negative, unworthy eye, that she's not as worthy as everyone else, instead of understanding the enormous place the convert has in the Jewish people and in God's eyes. And this is, of course, one of the themes of this work. And so actually a reason why this is studied on Shavuot, on the holiday of the giving of the Torah, because then we're told all the Jews, so to speak, became converts. They all became God's nation. And Rus is the embodiment of the convert. And we're told we're supposed to especially be kind to the convert, especially appreciate the convert because God does. There's a special love we're supposed to have for the convert. And we're supposed to understand it as God looks at it. Wow, you chose to join my flock. That's pretty nice. There's a lot of rules in my flock. You don't have to join my flock. You could be a Noachite, and that's fine and great and serving God. But you chose to join my flock. I'm very touched you chose to join my flock, God says. And that's how we're supposed to look at the convert, as such a special person that chose to join God's flock and voluntarily accepted upon themselves thousands and thousands of laws and restrictions that they did not have as a Noachite. It's very impressive. That's how we're supposed to look at a convert, not as like second class. So Rus is saying, wow, you're comforting me, because until now, the way the people were looking at me, I sort of felt like I was the second class citizen. And you're saying I'm right up there with everyone else. So just like she wasn't expecting anything from him. I don't expect you to give me anything. How you spoke to me, I'm already grateful, because you're making me feel worthy. At the same time, Some say that when she said, like, I'm not like one of your maidservants, now, of course, it just could sound like a very humble statement. You're so kind to me, I'm not even as worthy as a maidservant, which is sort of the general way it's taken. But some explain that what she meant was like, you're saying lots of nice things to me, but I'm not like your maidservants, meaning I'm not like these regular people that are looking like, what am I going to get? I gave this to God. What's he giving me back? I gave this to God to get something back. And I'm getting that thing back. Do I need to add more to get that back? And it's fine. We are allowed to do that. We're definitely allowed to use God as an ATM machine. It works. You're allowed to. You punch in the numbers. This is what you want to get out. This is what you give in. You're allowed to. A cashier, a register. This is what I want to buy. This is the goods I'm putting on the table. This is my currency, all of my service of God. And this is, I want some of this and some of this and some of this. And here's my payment. You're allowed to do that with God. You're 100% allowed to. But there are higher levels of service. So Rus was saying, I'm not like one of your maidservants. I'm not one of these people who, like, the common approach is, what am I going to get? This is what I did. What am I going to get? She said, I didn't do it for getting. I didn't do it for what's he giving me. I did it for God. I want God. I want to have that relationship with him. That's all I'm thinking about. Not you're reassuring me God's paying me back. I wasn't worried about being paid back. That's not why I went into this, to get paid back. That's not my point. I did it for the sake of heaven. So that's a very, very beautiful level. Now, obviously, if we're not holding there, it's okay too. It is fine to serve God, knowing he will always be there for us, knowing God never will remain indebted to us, knowing whatever measly amount of good we give him, he will always pay back bountifully. And it's fine to do, knowing and being certain in that. It's fine to do for the sake of that. I want this, and I'm doing that. I was speaking to someone today at length who has incredible financial straits, and I just pushed and pushed and pushed for her to give charity. Because if you give charity, God responds and gives you money. You're allowed to do that. 100% allowed to do that. If that's going to motivate you to give charity, great, God says. Test me in this. Give money. Give charity. You will see. You will get back financially. No question. So, of course, you're allowed to. But it's a high level to say, God, I'm serving you for you. I'm not serving you for payback. Payback? You want to give me payback? That's not my point in this. My point in this is you. And that's what she was saying. Okay, so thus ended their conversation seemingly, and she goes back to her harvesting. Now the boss had shown her some favor, and she went back to working and being like a pauper, and he went about his business. But the next verse says, at mealtime, Boaz said to her, we're at verse 14 now, come over here and partake of the bread and dip your morsel in the vinegar. So she sat beside the harvesters. He handed her parched grain, like, grain that they sort of roasted dry, not very deluxe fare. And she ate and was satisfied and had some left over. She deliberately left over because she wanted to bring food back to her mother-in-law. So it could be, as the Alsha comments, that by the time they finished talking, it was already mealtime. And then just sort of naturally morphed into this invitation. And he says, come sit here with me. So according to some commentators, this was sort of like prophetic. Not that he knew what he was saying. He was just sort of being nice to her, his cousin's widow, this nice convert that, sweet girl that, made such a, great self-sacrifice to convert. He's being nice to her. She doesn't have any food of her own. But some say it meant much more than that. Come to my table. The table symbolizes the kingship, the table of kings, because Boaz is the descendant of Judah. Boaz is in the line, the noble line of Judah. And from Boaz is going to come King David, King Solomon, the King Mashiach. So when Boaz is saying, come to my table, not that he meant this, but it was also the prophetic spirit saying, come, you're about to join the table of the kings. Because through her ultimate marriage with Boaz, This is going to produce the union of the kings of the Jewish people. So she sat. Now it's interesting. He says, come to my table. The verse says she sat next to the harvesters. He's invited her to sit with him, the boss. She did not take him up on his offer. She did take his food. She didn't have food. So she did take the food. She did not sit next to him. And she very carefully sat next to, not very close, but to the side of the harvesters. Why do you think, again, knowing all of her virtues, why would she choose to sit to the side of the harvesters and not place herself in any other location, like in front of them or behind them? Why is she sitting like to the side of them? How would that express her virtue? Why would she want to sit in front of them and therefore closer to Boaz?
She was very modest.
Okay. Exactly. And so why does she want to sit in front of the harvesters? What does being modest have to do with sitting in front of the harvesters?
Be like, I am like you. I am not more than you.
So it could be on a sort of moral level of like, I'm equal to the harvesters, I'm no better. But on a modest level, what else would it imply? Her not sitting in front of the harvesters. What would have happened if she was sitting in front of them?
She could be seen by them.
Exactly, Batsheva. If she's sitting in front of the harvesters, they're all looking at her and watching her. Well, that wouldn't feel very modest. And I mean, obviously she's completely dressed here, you know, head to toe, but still, she doesn't want to be on display in front of them. So why did she sit behind them? What would be the implication? Oh, what happened to my screen? What would be the implication if she was sitting behind them?
It actually says besides.
That's where she sat. She sat beside them. She did not sit in front, that they should be watching her. Why didn't she sit behind them? What would be the implication if she was sitting behind them?
She's looking at them from
Exactly. If she's sitting behind them, they could think, oh, she's checking us out. So she didn't sit behind them, that there shouldn't be this impression that she's looking at them. She didn't sit in front of them, that they shouldn't be looking at her. She sat to the side of them. I'm not looking at you. You're not looking at me. I'm not getting too close to Boaz. I'm sitting here modestly eating a little bit of the grain he gave me. He gave her a portion. She deliberately did not eat the whole portion. She let herself be satisfied with a little because she wanted to bring back food to her mother-in-law. Obviously, they didn't have any food. That's why she's harvesting here, which means her mother-in-law is left without food. She obviously didn't bring lunch in her bag because she didn't have any food. So she's hungry and she's been working all morning, but she just let herself be content with a little, you know, eat a little, chew it slowly. She allowed herself to be content with a little. With that little amount, she continued working the whole day because she wanted to save. As it says, as the verse says clearly, she had left over because she deliberately let herself be satisfied with a little that she should make sure to be able to give to her mother-in-law. And so she didn't feel like she should sit next to Boaz. That didn't feel appropriate. And she didn't feel like she should sit in front of the harvesters. And she didn't feel she should sit behind the harvesters. So she had so many thoughts going on to truly choose the most refined place. Even in this very minor choice, she was really thinking and calculating where is the most appropriate place to be. You see, there's a lot of thoughts that go into these minor decisions. So here she is sitting next to the harvesters, not up close to Boaz. Boaz sort of graciously then went and gave her these grains. That was her meal, which again, she didn't even eat the whole thing because she wanted to save for her mother-in-law. Now, there's an interesting thing we learned from here. The sages say, look what's going on. The verse makes such a big deal about this. Like this is recorded for eternity. This happened a long time ago. This happened thousands of years ago. And we all know that Boaz gave Rus for lunch some roasted ears of grain. verse says, imagine if Boaz knew that the verse would recount as his praise that he's sharing this food with this pauper, with this poor widow, with this convert. He's being so nice. He's giving her some grain. If Boaz knew that this was so important, he would have run to give her meat, fish, fowl. But he didn't know what he was doing that was so important, so he just took some of the grains. In other words, he wasn't thinking, oh, this is a very poor woman, who's a very special woman, who's obviously a very wise and modest and holy woman, very pious and probably very hungry. And probably she's not going to eat it all because she's going to save some for her mother-in-law, who must also be hungry, who's my aunt, by the way. If he was appreciating how much God appreciated his kindness, he would have done far more. We say this actually, another person we say this about is Reuven. What happened with Reuven? When the brothers sold Joseph, so it says that Joseph was coming to them. They saw Joseph coming and they said, oh, he deserves to die. They had, so to speak, made a tribunal court and made a legal verdict that he should die because he's trying to obviously get them all killed, spiritually or physically. He was endangering all of them. And if someone's trying to kill you, you kill him first. So they declared as a court that he had to be killed. It wasn't an act of murder. It was a legal act. That's how they viewed it. They, as a tribunal court, 10 people, 10 great sages were saying he has to die. And as he approaches them, and they're going to kill him. When Joseph comes, they're about to kill him. Reuven stops them from killing him. Reuven says, how can we do this? Our hands should be wet with his blood? Yes, he has to die. We met and we ordained he has to die, but we shouldn't kill him with our own hands. Let's put him in this pit and he'll die himself, but our hands shouldn't have his blood. And the verse says about this, that Reuven intended to return him to his father. That was really what was going on in Reuven's head. Reuven was like, we can't do this. Yes, we sat and we judged and we discussed it legally, and in beautiful theory, we all decided he has to die. But bottom line, we can't kill him. No way should my father go through the pain of us killing him. So guess what? We're not going to kill him. But I can't stand up to my brothers and say, hey, I'm the oldest. I see the clearest. Can't kill him. He didn't have that strength to do that. So he made a ploy. I'll tell them, put him in the pit. And then later everyone's going to leave and I'll take him out of the pit and bring him back home to father. That was his plan. Now it didn't happen because in the meanwhile he was gone from the scene and they sold him. But that was truly his intention. So the verse says that Reuven said this, that Reuven, so to speak, stood up to the other brothers and said, no, our hands can't shed his blood. Let's throw him into the pit instead. Sort of in a devious way, planning to save him, but he didn't say that to them. He just sort of said, why should our hands get dirty? Put him in the pit and he'll die from, thirst. And the verse says that, wow, Reuven did this to save him and return him to his father. Our sages say about this verse that if Reuven knew that thus would be recorded in Torah about him, that so much would God appreciate his good intentions, which didn't materialize. I mean, obviously he did save his life, but he wasn't able to return him to his father. And then he wound up in Egypt for 22 years. But if he knew how much God appreciated his efforts, that God recorded it in his Torah, it says Reuven would have picked up Joseph in front of all the brothers, put him on his shoulders, and carried him back to his father. Wow. God appreciates what I'm doing like that. I've got to go all the way. Similarly, if Boaz knew that God appreciated that he was being kind here to this woman who's a widow that you're supposed to be kind to, who's a convert who you're supposed to be kind to, who's poor that you're supposed to be kind to, if he would have realized the value of what he was doing, he would have gone and gotten the best foods and given it to her instead of the poorest foods, just some grains. That's all he had. Again, he wasn't coming for this whole big lunch. He had a house full of food, but she had nothing. And still, the verse records it like such a nice thing that he gave her food. If he knew how much it was appreciated, he would have gone all the way, given her the best of the best, which I think is a very powerful lesson for us, as I think sometimes, if only we knew how God really appreciates what we do. It's very hard to know. It's hard to know what God appreciates. It's hard to know how valuable what we're doing is to God, because am I really so big? Am I really so important? Is God really paying attention? And the answer is yes, yes, and yes. You are so big. You are so important. God is paying attention. God cares. And God appreciates it. And it's really healthy for us to remember that. Just like it says about Mashiach, it says that when Mashiach comes, as I know I've told you this before, God is going to go to every single Jew. There are about 15 million of us. Plus, there's probably a lot more that don't know they're Jewish that are Jewish. And thank each one for everything we've done to bring Mashiach. Now you could say, well, what's he going to say thank you to me for? What have I done to bring Mashiach? I don't know I did anything to bring Mashiach. That's not how God looks at it. God looks at it and really understands each one of us, what we're doing, much more than we understand. God appreciates what we're doing much more than we appreciate. There's so many stories like that. Like there's a story of a simple Jew. Simple, I mean, he served God, but he was a very simple Jew. And when he passed away and he came up to the court of heaven, they weren't sure which direction he should go. I mean, he obviously did lots of good things in his life, and he did things that weren't so good. Some from ignorance, some from a lack of refinement. So they weren't sure. But then the angels that were defending him, they put, so to speak, on the heavenly scale, this wagon. Then they added people. Then they added mud and more rocks and sand. And it weighed so much, it says, that the weight of that wagon and the people and the horses, sorry about the horses and the rocks and the mud and the sand, tipped his scale to the side of virtue, and he went in a good direction. And what was that was being added? So it's explained that once he was very strong when he was young. After he passed away, he wasn't so young. But when he was young, he was very strong. He did some physical labor his whole life, obviously, as many people did in those days. And as he was walking back from work, he sees this whole wagon loaded with people, like careening out of control. The horses were galloping out of control. And it was very obvious that it was going to be a tragedy. But who can stop all these galloping horses? But he was very strong. He was fairly fearless. And he understood that if he did it, the whole wagon is going to turn over, and who knows what will happen to all the people. So he jumped and grabbed hold of the reins of the horses, and he stopped the horses, and he saved the entire wagon. And then it says he went home. He didn't even think about it. He did it, kept moving, whatever. He didn't know who the people were. They didn't reward him. He didn't ask for anything. He moved on. And years later, when he passed away, that one good deed, that selfless, pure good deed he did, literally brought him to the side of eternal merit. So we have no clue which is that good deed. What is it that God wants from us? But therefore, we really just have to keep in mind, he appreciates. He really appreciates everything we do. When we push ourselves to learn, when we push ourselves to pray, to say Tehillim, Psalms, to give charity, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to refrain from gossip, to be honest, to be compassionate, to keep the Shabbos, to keep the kosher. When we push ourselves to serve him, he really, really appreciates it. So just as Boaz had no clue how much God was appreciating this, minor thing in his day, nothing he attributed as very important, and it's being written for posterity, for eternity. Just imagine how God looks at each one of us and says, yes, I appreciate it. I know it's not so easy. Yes, Firma.
So when a lot of bad things are happening to one person, obviously it's good because nothing Hashem does is bad. but not like an open goodness. Is that like a way of him telling you, um, like testing you, or do you think it's like a way of him trying to tell you something else? Like, do you think it's like
You're
a test,
saying
like
if
to
a
see
person
how?
is going through hard times, as they process hard times, should they view it as just a test to keep faithful and trusting, or should they view it as a reproof for something wrong they did?
Yeah.
That's the question. So what we're supposed to do, that's a great question, and sort of relates to what we're talking about here. So what we're told in the Talmud is if you're going through a hard time, you're supposed to search yourself, analyze your deeds to understand exactly the answer to your question. Meaning, if you're going through a hard time and you think about it and you're like, oh, this could be God, my wake-up call. Like God maybe is saying, you've been slacking off, you're not being so kind and compassionate and patient as you should be, or you're not serving me properly and I really haven't been, and I've got to improve and work on myself. But if you're looking at your deeds and you actually have been really focused lately, I've been really strong. Now, again, sometimes, to make the situation trickier, it could be that you have been really strong and accrued a lot of virtue. And that's why God, in his compassion, is trying to remind you of previous things you did that you didn't repent for. Because the verse says, the one who God loves, he reproves. Meaning, if a person's not behaving very well, God could just sort of let them not behave very well and okay, whatever. In the afterlife, like, no rush. But if a person's turning to God and becoming closer and closer, God could say, oh, I really want you to repent in this world. I want you to have the merit of repenting now. So I'm going to send you a reminder, a wake-up call, a signal, so you'll look at yourself and start repenting because you deserve it. You're working so hard on coming close to me. I want to help finish off the process. So stage one is look at yourself and think, is there something I'm doing wrong? And that's what this is coming to remind me of. If nothing dings there, stage two is there something in the past I've done wrong that I never really repented for? I don't do it anymore, but I never really repented for. And maybe now, because I am getting closer to God, God is reminding me of something from the past so I can deal with it and refine it. And if neither of those things ding in your brain, nothing on record that you could think of that would warrant this, and nothing currently that will warrant this, then yes, you will look at it like, okay, I mean, I feel close to God. I know I'm really serving him. And this is probably my test to stay strong and stay believing and stay trusting and stay strong and believing and trusting. And know that, as I say in Hebrew, Gamze Ya'avar. He's doing this for
Could
his
it be
reason.
like,
It will pass.
could it all be three, like all of them?
Could it be all three? It could be. It
Or
could
like
be.
trying to guide you, like close the door, I guess, to let you out the window?
It could be.
Kind of.
It could be. A person sort of has to sincerely search in their heart and try to understand and trust Hashem that they're going to find the truth. Sometimes we need to consult with other people because we can't see ourselves so clearly, but consulting with others or doing it yourself, trust that Hashem will guide you to the truth. Any other questions? Sorry, I was going on for a long time. Okay. Fine. So she eats her big meal here. These roasted grains, of which she didn't even eat the whole portion because she wanted to make sure her mother-in-law got some of these roasted grains. And then she got up to glean. Like she's moving on. She's got work to do. They can sit and eat. She's got work to do. And Boaz ordered the young men, meaning the harvesters, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, which she wasn't supposed to, technically. Do not embarrass her. So he's sort of saying to them, give her a free hand. Even if she took areas where the poor are not legally entitled to, let her. Don't embarrass her. Be sympathetic. She has a hard situation. Now, of course, Rus was not being told this. This is what he told them. And obviously we already discussed how Rus was careful with Jewish law and knowledgeable. So it's not like she was about to do something wrong, but at the same time, he was sort of telling the men, like, be nice to her. So she gleaned in the field. Oh, sorry, another verse. And even deliberately pull out some for her from the heaps and leave them for her to glean. Don't rebuke her. So this is the next verse. What is he telling his people? Remember, she can only glean what got dropped, right? That was, remember, we spoke about the corners. That's where everybody went because that was the big pickings. She didn't want to be like pushing and shoving with anyone, so she didn't go where most of the paupers went. Then there were two other presents, gifts to the poor. One was if someone made a whole sheave, a whole like a bundle of grain and forgot it. That didn't happen too often. But what was more common, though still not as lucrative as the corners, was as the harvesters are gathering and bundling, things drop, little pieces drop. And that's what she was allowed to take, and that's what she was taking. So Boaz says, as you're doing your work, let some more drop. Deliberately let drop so she can get a lot in an honorable way. Meaning, it's an interesting thing he was doing here. On one hand, you could say he wasn't being so nice. This is his cousin, his dead cousin's wife. She's supporting his aunt who's impoverished. He could be a little nicer than saying, yeah, no problem. Do what Torah allows and glean like the poorest of the poor. But maybe you could look at it like this. I mean, she could have always come to me. Naomi could have always come to me and asked. Of course, I would have given her. Naomi chose not to. I'm going to respect that. But I'm going to try to help in a discreet way. Because that's considered a very big virtue when giving charity, is to give charity not to embarrass the recipient. So right now, like she's a worker. She's honest labor. Her hands were not used to it, but she was doing honest labor, so to speak, to gather the food. So he's telling the gatherers, the reapers, drop. Leave a lot for her. But she's not going to realize. She just sees you're very careless, so she gets a lot. But she doesn't realize that we're really doing it to try to make it easier for her. And like basically, she's a convert. She deserves compassion. She's a special woman. We trying to be nice to her. Next verse. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and she beat out what she had gleaned. And it came to about an ephah, that's a biblical measurement, an ephah of barley. So the reapers dropped lots. She was careful. She didn't take everything they dropped because according to law, you're only allowed to take 2 stalks at a time. If people drop more than that, they're going to come back for it. So they were like sort of dropping all over the place, and she only was taking 2 at a time from what was allowed. She was still following the law, but she managed to accrue because God was blessing her work and because Boaz had told his men to generously drop a lot. So between the two, she got an ephah of barley. Now, of course, she worked all day. If she had wanted, because Boaz told the men to drop a lot, she could have just gathered up everything they were dropping and have much more quickly finished her work. But again, from his end, he was telling them to drop. From her end, she was following the law, so she wasn't taking all that was dropping. But she was working industriously, and God blessed her, so she had a very large amount. She had an ephah. An ephah, it says that an ephah is quite a large amount because basically, if they were eating carefully at this moment, between her and Naomi, 2 women, they had enough now to eat for the next 5 days. So it's like 10 portions, 10 days worth of barley she managed to gather in this one day, which again, Boaz's people helped. She worked hard and God helped. That she was able to truly gather so much. Because remember, she didn't go where it was lucrative to the corners. You also see that from here. She could have just gone to the corners initially, like she's hungry. Naomi's hungry. She's supporting 2 people. She has to go where the food is. As if she's embarrassing herself. But she did the more virtuous thing. She was allowed to go to the corners, but she didn't feel it would be like, scrounging around, like people fighting over the food. She didn't want to be part of that scene. And God rewarded her because God said, fine, you're going to go to a place where it's harder to find the food, but I'm with you. Don't worry. You can find an ephah of barley in just what they drop, which was a lot of barley to find. She carried it and came to the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she took out and gave her what she had left over after eating her fill. Remember, many hours earlier, this was her only meal of the day. Boaz had given her those roasted grains, and she set aside some. She made her fill small because she knew her mother-in-law had no food. So she brought home this food for her mother-in-law. Besides the barley that she had now gathered, they would have to work through to make from it food. She had this ready-to-eat food. She had these roasted grains. So she deliberately ate a little bit, even though she was literally on her feet working all day. But she put this aside for her mother-in-law. So she gives her the food. She gives her this ephah, this tremendous amount in one day. She did not expect her to gather 5 days worth of food for them. And she saw wow, how much she had done, how much she had accomplished. And she realized this makes no sense. There's no way in one day you could have done all this. Something happened. Now, maybe the something was that God was just being very gracious to us, because we know that we make our effort and God does his. And our effort doesn't have to literally be enough to create the outcome. It just has to be some effort, and we have to serve God. We could look at when the Jews gathered the mun, the bread of heaven that they ate for 40 years in the desert. It says if they gathered a lot, if they gathered a little, when they came home, it was 1 omer. That's exactly what it was, because that was the measurement God was giving them. And we see this, and we have to have that perspective in our life as well. The human perspective is the natural world perspective is, well, if I want to earn more, I'm going to work harder. If I want to lose weight, I'm going to exercise and eat less. And if I'm not losing enough, I'll exercise more and eat less. And that will somehow create this weight loss. So if I need to earn money, I'm going to work harder. And if I'm not earning enough money, I'll work even harder. But that's not what creates money. What creates money is God giving it to you. God determining that you're worthy, and then him choosing to take whatever you're doing and using that as a vehicle for success. So it's not so much how hard are you working to earn the money. You have to work enough so God doesn't have to make nature-breaking, nature-defying miracles. But once you're ready, you're giving him some vehicle, don't worry. He wants to give you money. He's got plenty of natural opportunities. He could take this little vehicle you're making and make it hold so much. So she was doing what she was doing, and somehow she came home with a lot. How? So her mother-in-law says to her in the next verse, where did you glean today? How did you get so much? Her mother-in-law asked her, where did you work? May the one that took such generous notice of you be blessed. She's thinking, her mother-in-law's thinking, it must be that where she went, again, either God made her unbelievably successful, or perhaps the way God did it was he made someone very kind to her, because it doesn't make sense. How could she possibly have gathered this in one day? So she told her mother-in-law, whom she had worked by, and said, oh, the name of the man I worked today is Boaz. Now, it's not certain, sages are not clear, did Rus know the family relationship between her, meaning her former husband, and Boaz? But of course, Naomi knew. Boaz is Naomi's nephew. Boaz is now the leader of the Jews. Boaz is now the richest man among Judah, among the Jewish people. And Boaz is first cousin with her son, Machlon, Rus's husband. And that's very, very, very significant to the continuation of events, to what we're going to call here the storyline of what's going on here. So Naomi realizes far more than Rus, seemingly, because seemingly, we're not sure, but seemingly Rus did not realize, or maybe she did, we don't know, if she knew that Boaz was a close relative, a cousin to her deceased husband. So why was that significant that this is a cousin? Because as we've said before, Rus and Machlon didn't have any children. So since they didn't have any children, perhaps Naomi was already, when she heard that Boaz was so nice to her, thinking, oh, maybe Boaz could be induced, or is thinking, to make that special marriage with Rus as a yibum for my dead child, Machlon. So remember, we discussed this. This is part of our 2 days of introduction. We discussed this concept that spiritually, if someone passes away, childless, but has the ability to produce children, it's not, they just for some reason never had children. Both the husband and the wife could technically have had children, but they didn't. Then there's a special mitzvah, special commandment for a relative to marry the widow of the deceased person. And the child born is considered like the spiritual heir, like the spiritual child, not of the biological father, but of the deceased man's, as the deceased man's child. Now, nowadays, first of all, we don't do this anymore. In the Torah, you give 2 options, a ceremony called chalitza to disengage the two, or this marriage. In English, they call it a levirate marriage, which we call yibum. There are countless, hundreds of laws about yibum. And as we discussed in the introduction, we don't do it today. People aren't considered on a high enough level to purely marry for the sake of the deceased man. And that's the point of that marriage, so therefore we don't do it. Also, when it was done, or nowadays, the chalitza shoe ceremony is only for brothers of the deceased man. Meaning, if the deceased man does not have any living brothers, there's no possibility of not yibum and not chalitza. And nowadays, there's no possibility of yibum, so the only option is chalitza, if there's a living brother. But in these times, of course, yibum was done. Yibum stopped many, 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 many years later. And it wasn't only limited to the brothers. It would extend to the relatives. Now, at this moment, was Boaz thinking about marrying her? What do you think? Based on what you know so far of our story. You think Boaz was thinking, oh, she's so righteous, she's so virtuous. My wife just passed away. Maybe this is all the hand of God. What do you think? He's 80 years old. She's 40. What do you
I think yes. Like, it's the easy mind would say yes, but I feel like he probably really wasn't.
Okay, so Fromma's romantic mind wants to say yes, and her practical mind is saying, no, he probably wasn't. Anyone else? Rachel?
Do we see that he even knew that he knew that she was wife of his cousin?
Yes, he did know that because he asked, who is she? And then he didn't know who she was when he saw her. He didn't know what she looked like. But when he saw her and he was impressed because she was so modest and she knew the law, she wasn't taking what she wasn't allowed to take, he said, who is she? And then the 4 men said, like Boaz, don't get so interested. She's that Moabite that came back with Naomi. Now that Moabite means the widow of his cousin. So he did know who she was.
Hi, this is Hava. I don't think he at that moment he was thinking about marriage. Like the whole story, it goes so slowly. Like first he just said like you can pick up from my field, right? And then like a little more, a little lower, like a very like a small steps. Yeah, very, very slow pace. I don't think he was thinking about marriage yet.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts on it based on what we've seen so far and what we understand based on what we've discussed, the character of Boaz and the status of Boaz and the age of Boaz and Rus and how he was treating her? Any other thoughts? Based on how he treated her, did it sound like he was considering marrying her or that he wasn't considering marrying her?
I think he was very intrigued with her.
You think he was intrigued? Anyone
Yeah,
else?
like by her modesty.
Like, wow, she's special.
Yeah, he appreciated her modesty and he tried to be nice to her. So he treated her differently from other people.
Yes, he was treating her differently. He absolutely was.
I think he was, I'm more inclined to think that he was thinking about it, or at least, yeah, or you know, going in that direction.
Going in some of that direction, like Chava said, very slowly.
Slowly, but in that
Slowly
direction.
in that direction.
Yes.
Anyone else? I think what everyone said is really part of the puzzle. Meaning, I can't tell you. I can't tell you. It's not definitively addressed in the verse. Seemingly based on the storyline, he wasn't. But at the same time, I firmly used an interesting word. She said he's intrigued by her. And we see that he is taking an interest in her. As Rachel said, he realizes she's a very special person. He sees her modesty, I mean, to the degree that she's making a whole calculation. If I sit next to Boaz, no. If I sit in front of the harvester, so I'm sort of listening to him, no, that's not modest at all. If I sit behind them, oh, that sounds really modest. No, that's not modest. Then it's like I'm staring at them. I'll sit to the side of them. Like she makes this whole calculation in her head where she should sit to truly do the most modest thing. It's not so easy to be so modest. So, and he realized that, and he sees how special she is and how knowledgeable she is. And even after he tells the harvesters, just drop for her, she didn't take all of that because she knew the law. You can only take 2 things at a time. So if they drop 5, she only took 2 and moved on. So he definitely noticed her, as Rachel said, appreciated, saw she was special, as From was saying, was intrigued by her. So probably some things are ticking in the back of his head. So Chava said it's moving slowly. I agree with her, but there is sort of a sense of something percolating there, very almost like you say subconsciously, but something is going in that direction. Now, in the official storyline, as we're going to continue in our slow journey, learning, he doesn't propose tomorrow at all. He doesn't try to put himself in the line of getting married to her, probably for the very, very simple reason that he was 80 years old. And in those days, again, you have to understand that 80 was, in a sense, older than we view it now. Obviously, in much earlier times, 80 was a lot younger. But in those days, 80 was really old. He was an old person. His wife just passed away and he's 80. And even though he's 40, but she still somehow looked young. And he was viewing himself as old. So maybe he was interested. Maybe he was sensing she was special. Maybe in the back of his head, there would be this, she seems very special, but not for me. Obviously not for me. Not for me. Chava, what did you want to add?
If I remember the story correctly, it's not very obvious to me, or maybe I don't remember exactly, that he was the closest relative who's supposed to marry her. So it wasn't.
That's what happened. That's exactly what happened.
Right.
He was not. There was someone closer. And that's
Right.
why he did not put himself in the line at all. Because
Right.
now, again, could he have in that situation? It's a little hard for us to understand again, because never mind, we don't do this marriage. Even when we did the marriage, we only, for generations, when it was done, it was only done with brothers. If there were no brothers of the deceased man, there's no concept. The whole mitzvah does not apply. So in those days, they did it differently than we do it. But still, the hierarchy would have been whoever's the closest relative. And Boaz tried very hard to convince the closer relative to marry her, which sort of shows us both things. Like he's really caring about Rus's status, and he's really trying to help Rus. He does care, going like beyond the call of duty. He is interested in her and thinks she's very special and thinks she deserves to marry this person. But the man refused. I'm not going to marry a Moabite. What are you thinking? A Moabite? So Boaz says, well, if you're not, then I will. Which led to a lot of scandalous talk that Boaz was going to do this, and did it. But definitely already at this first meeting, something did happen. And I do agree with Rachel and Fruma that there was this sense on Boaz's part of being aware of her. Because listen, I mean, they came to town a week before. Of course, you could say during that week he was mourning his wife, so he obviously wasn't free to do anything. But it wasn't like he was getting up and out, finding out about what his poor aunt was doing. It wasn't like on his list. But God put it on his list because God sent Rus to his field and sent him to his fields. So he should notice her, and he should think about her, and he should do things in her direction, which is what, as we're going to see, happened. Okay, so we will stop at this point. So we got about exactly what I thought we would after we're just up to verse 20. And let's do something in the laws of Shabbos. I don't know if anybody was inspired last week to make sure to take that shower or get dressed nicely before the candle lighting, as we discussed.
As we started to work at home, almost every Friday, I'm taking shower, trying. I mean, I'm doing almost every day, but I'm thinking, about Shabbat, and then,
That's so nice. I also, this past Friday, was very conscious. I was very conscious. This is in honor of Shabbos. It felt very holy. I was definitely impacted by what we discussed, because I really felt like the energy of this. This is an act to prepare for the Sabbath. It is a very holy act that prepares me for the Sabbath. I'm giving God the message. Something special is happening. I'm getting ready for it. I'm getting dressed up. So I also felt it this week. This week I felt it. But thank you, Bella, that you're feeling it too. And I hope other people are as well. Maybe different things
I
resonate.
definitely,
That really resonated with me. I remembered it Friday. We discussed this Monday. Firma, what were you going to say?
I definitely like to make things special for Shabbos. So I feel like I always have it in mind, but like I made sure to do something small extra. Like I like peaceful. I don't know. It makes me feel like when I do a lot of things like during the week to prepare, I feel like it makes it just more like peaceful and relaxing and special. So I definitely, I took on something extra too as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And I mean, I am observing Shabbos for a long time, but I think this classes, whatever, even like few minutes of reminder about something special makes a huge difference for me. Like whatever we learn on Monday, I think about it the whole week and try to implement it in like a little extra, a little special. It's not like a routine in a way. I'm like, for example, I didn't know about putting salt on a table before Shabbos. So I was thinking about it, make sure that I won't forget it. And like, it was like, it adds something special. So like to me, I really appreciate that we spend time talking about Shabbos. I think it brings that extra excitement about Shabbos.
Here, and I feel the same. And I've been keeping Shabbos for a long time also, but I really do feel just, especially because these laws are sort of like, They're not the laws of don't do this that we know or might not know. This is like more, at least the laws we're discussing now are all honoring her. That's what I feel. We've been discussing, I've been honoring her, giving honor to the Sabbath, understanding that it's a very special gift that God gives us every week. From a Kabbalistic perspective, Shabbos is holier than any holiday. Holidays have a different energy, but in terms of holiness, the holiest day is Shabbos. That's why Yom Kippur is called the ultimate Shabbos, not the ultimate holiday, the ultimate Shabbos. Because Shabbos has a very special holiness. And when I took that shower on Friday and I got dressed in my Shabbos robe, I was really thinking like, this is really to greet the Shabbos properly. So I really felt it myself. So it had a very big impact on me. And also I was surprised. I was remembering it all week also. So thank you. I'm glad that I'm not the only one and that a number of people here are also feeling that. So today we're going to say something else, which is actually something you're not supposed to do, but for the same reason, to give honor, which is on Friday, you shouldn't eat a big meal, like unusually large meal. So you should have a certain sense of like hunger or appreciation for the Shabbos meal. It doesn't mean you're not allowed to eat on Friday, of course. You can eat, but like you shouldn't really have a big meal on Friday. A regular meal you're allowed to have, but some people from like, how should I put it? Like 3/4 of the day in, like 2 to 3 hours before Shabbos, they would refrain from eating anything substantial. They wouldn't eat like bread or cake, crackers, those types of heavier foods. So they come into Shabbos and they're going to appreciate the food. They're not going to come to Shabbos like, oh, you know, I a meal. I ate all day. I don't need a meal. Purim's coming up. We're going to have Purim on a Friday and then go into Shabbos. But you're supposed to, in general, try to like eat lightly on Friday. Again, no law to fast or anything like that. We're not saying that at all. But like to eat a little lightly, so you, or and especially as the day goes on, to eat lightly. Like let's say nowadays when Shabbos comes in at 4, like from 2 o'clock, not to eat anything very substantial. So one should eat with appreciation the foods of Shabbos. All right, we'll see if that sticks with us for a week. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for sharing that the laws of Shabbos, or just discussing some of the ways we honor Shabbos, is meaningful to you. It's meaningful to me, and I'm really glad that it's meaningful to you as well.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone for coming and for sharing.
Bye.
Thank you. Have
Thank
a
you. Thank you.
wonderful
Thank
week.
you.
Thank you.